I'm hoping we are live. Oh, so we're live in. Yeah,
it says live.
Apparently.
Yeah, it says live.
Hopefully. I'm just checking on another device and I can't see myself, so I'm going to turn that off. So good morning, afternoon, everybody. Hey, Marti, how you doing?
I'm good. Good to be with you, Steve.
Yeah, we had a nice little chat beforehand, so we're all prepped. Unfortunately, Evelyn Clark, who normally is the facilitator of this session, is dealing with other personal things. And in business, we try and put our priorities where they should be, and so Av's off doing that. But I'm really happy to have Marti here, talking about collective consciousness. This is our third session, Marti. So there's probably going to be a few people who are listening to this for the very first time. So it might be worthwhile if you just sort of give us a quick recap on what we talked about in sessions 1 and 2. Those sessions are available on YouTube and on the 6-Star Business sites. But maybe if you could just sort of give us a quick recap for my benefit as well, right?
Okay. I don't know if anything about consciousness is quick, but I'll do my best. It's very deep, and I think that's the first thing that we need to understand is that for us humans, consciousness is really not that complicated, but it's very deep and gives us an incredible skill. So from my viewpoint, working with indigenous cultures for so many years, from my viewpoint, what they've taught me is that human consciousness is dependent on how we use awareness. It's really kind of that simple. And Steve and I have spent a couple of sessions trying to kind of lay this out. What's the difference between how Westerners go about being conscious and what would happen if we were what I call fully conscious? So I've been speaking about this business of how we use awareness, and just very gently touching on the starting points. If we grew up in a indigenous culture, what we call indigenous culture, we would have been taken out into nature very, very young and taught to put our awareness on the world around us. And we would have been taught to receive what's called the speech of nature. We would have been taught to recognize energies coming in and the information encoded in those energies. So if I speak metaphorically, I would have been able to know the individual trees in my forest. I would have known the exact raven that comes to my house and could tell that raven from the other 5,000 ravens that fly through. I would have a lot of information about the world around me, and the world would tell me the best way to take care of myself. The world would show me, the earth would show me how to create value. Yeah. And all kinds of things, tons of information that we need for our own well-being and for how to get along with one another. It used to, for humans, all come from the world around us. But in general, what's happened to us, and this is the thing Steve and I are trying to sort of untangle, is over, especially the last 2,000 years or so, humans have removed their awareness from the environment and become much more interested in what's inside them and how the body works and how the brain works and how we even have an idea, or what is language? How do we understand any given word? Where does it come from? So we've come so far inside ourselves that our awareness has tended to come to the self. And the ego structure sits in a very small part of our consciousness. And most people in the world today are walking around with their awareness on that ego structure. So the problem is, if we're in that tiny little part of our consciousness, we're processing information very, very, very differently than if we were still tuned to the world first. And that's where all our problems are. Are we in that two-dimensional layer of consciousness processing information in an either or, A to B to C way, or are we in a deeply relational, multi-dimensional relationship to the world, seeing things from many viewpoints all the time? So that's
you did
the recap.
You did a great job of putting a lifetime of work into less than 3 minutes, Marti. So So yeah, so I hope that gives everybody a sort of an understanding of where, what we're trying to grapple with as business owners. And so where we left it last week was that I have this hypothesis based on my intensive years of the last 3 minutes of research in brain, right, relative. And so I've said often that my view is that we as humans are dealing in an environment, and if I could put it in today's parlay, it's like we've got an operating system that is version 1.3 and it's about to be upgraded to 1.4, but the environment that we're working in is like at 4.0, right? So it just, the two are not compatible. The fact that we were hunter and gatherers, less than 100,000 years ago, probably, if you think about the 10th, 11th century, we were warring humans, and we are now today still warring, but in a different way. And as business owners, we're not out, cropping, putting wheels on carts, etc. It's a far more industrious, busier environment to be in. So I'm hoping that because at the last session you sort of implied that I was wrong, and I'm hoping that you are, and I'm hoping this is your opportunity to debunk me. So the floor is yours, Marti.
I'll do my best. Well, we're kind of both right, but again, I hope I can make this clear. The problem really lies in where our awareness ends up. So the part of the brain, the nervous system, Steve, that you're noticing is, in modern terms, we call it very primitive. It was designed and still tries to operate in the same way to keep us from getting lost or eaten, basically. So there's a part of the brain that combines feeling response to experience with the experience. So if you have a loving mother, this part of the brain wires your loving response to that loving mother, and so you've got a good connection. If you meet somebody who is nasty to you, your limbic system, if it happens early enough, this will be something that happens through your life. Your limbic system will start to wire a danger response, a fear response to somebody who's threatening. And that response, that wiring gets kind of generalized. So people who are like that person who first terrified you, you'll shy away from. So it's very, very deep wiring. This is good, that is not good. This is life positive, that's life negative. So if we were little antelopes in the savannah, our mommy antelope would teach us the sound of the rustle of the lion in the grass. And she would say to us, that sound, that rustle, run away from, because if you don't, you'll get eaten. And so the brain takes that sound and wires it in as a danger signal, and then it pads it. So any sound within, I don't know how many degrees that is of that sound, the danger signal flips, and we get into fight or flight mode. And we'll either, there's also freeze in there. Freeze is the third option, fight, flight, or freeze. And we have this instantaneous response to the world. So if we were living in the savannah as early humans, or in the forest as early humans, this limbic system of ours would be wired to life positive and life negative things. And it worked well when we were tuned to the world around us, which is how we used to live. Yeah. It operates at a level of our human consciousness, which is only designed to do certain things. So if we get all of our awareness into this level, our world becomes very small. And this is kind of what's happened to modern people. So if I'm a modern person, I'm not living in the savannah. I might be living in a city and have to worry about getting run over, crossing the street. We have different fears, so our limbic systems are operating differently. But the problem is that most people have their awareness trapped in this small layer of our conscious capacity. So everything is yes or no, good or bad, I stay, I run. And when you've only got two choices, day in and day out, I mean, imagine you're running a business and you're run by your limbic fear circuit. It's impossible. You can't imagine a third option. The third option is freeze. And it's constantly yes, no, yes, no. I said yes to this. Was I wrong about this other thing? And so you get a whole population of people completely stressed because our natural capacity is multidimensional, interrelated. We're designed for complexity. Yeah. So it's not that part of the brain is an ancient operating system. I mean, it is ancient, but if that's the only thing you're relying on, then yes, you have the problem that you're seeing. But we're not supposed to be living in that thin layer of consciousness that's designed to, it runs on causality, and it's designed to choose A or B. It can't choose A and B. And I had a few hours, I could map that out for you. So the thing about this is that if we're living in that thin layer and we're kind of glued to our limbic fear circuit, we're also glued to our ego structure at that level. So everything is also about us, and our A or B decisions day in and day out become about us. I'm okay if I do the right thing. I'm not okay if I do the wrong thing. So our stress levels rise, which increases the sensitivity of that fear circuit. And so people get more and more sensitive and more aggressive or more and more frightened. And you have the world we live in, right? So let's take a business person who says, okay, I want to break out of this. The training is itself quite ancient. It comes from the earliest human cultures and human societies. The training is, you have to stop thinking, and you stop thinking by taking yourself out into nature. And we talked about this in our first few sessions. Tune your awareness to the world around you. Now, that's a simple instruction, but there's a lot of steps to it. There are a lot of intricacies to that. But imagine that even in the modern world, I tune myself to the world around me, and I get used to listening to energies. So I walk into a meeting in a big corporate building in the middle of the jungle that we call a city, and instead of going in with my ego in front of me like a glacial terminal moraine, I go in with my senses open, and I read the energy of the room. I read the energy of the people, and I get a whole lot of information about who's feeling what. Yeah. And I also, if I've had some training of my awareness, when I present if I present a proposal, I'm going to do it in a multidimensional way, not a linear way. We come in with studies and feasibility studies and strategies, and they're A to B to C, and there's the endpoint. Do you want the endpoint? But a better way to present things is in multiple dimensions with multiple views. And if my awareness is tuned to the world around me, I'm going to be processing information in multiple views. And the human brain is exquisitely designed for this. Part of the reason we've got so many unhappy people in the world is they're living in a tiny pinch of their conscious capacity, and the soul of who they are is weeping. What about the rest of me? Right? We're designed to be creative. We're designed to pull things out of thin air. I always think about people like, or even in sort of modern human times, we have natural human geniuses. That's what we call them. And you think about Einstein. He didn't bother talking when he was young because he was busy tuning into the world. He didn't need language, because we know things before we create language. And so there's Einstein, nearly institutionalized because he didn't need language yet. Yeah. And he imagined the universe. He imagined that the speed of light wasn't the fastest thing around. And he imagined it not from his ego, but because he was listening to the universe and the information came to him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You could see that. That's how he got to this imaginal exercise he used to do as a kid. He imagined he was standing on the front end of a beam of light. And if light was the fastest thing and he held a mirror out in front of him, he wouldn't be able to see his image because the light wouldn't be there yet. But he always saw his image.
So
that was his starting point.
Yeah. So we all have the genius of Einstein if we just didn't speak, right? but yeah, well, and as leaders, that we're advised as leaders or encouraged to speak last, right? So listen as if you're going to lead, take everybody else's opinion in first, read the room. A couple of things that came up for me, Marti, questions more than statements. Did all of this start with the likes of Socrates and, going back where they were writing about the situation around them and focused on, on themselves, as opposed to maybe the shamans of the villages, South America?
Yeah. My understanding of this, my felt sense of this is that when we settled down and we started making literal settlements, if you think of the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys where the Greeks rose up and the Romans followed, we gradually drew our awareness away from nature and went inside ourselves. I think of it, it's like a bifurcation point in chaos theory. If something's trundling along like a tree root, it's going this way. At some unpredictable moment, some of the root's going to go another way.
Right.
Yeah. And so here we are trundling along as humans, paying attention to the world around us. At some point, somebody was going to say, hey, what about what's inside? I know enough about what's outside. Okay, so that's fine. And so we began to study the body, and we began to study thought, and we began to philosophize and all these things. But the problem is that it became culture-wide. An entire people withdrew their awareness from the world around them. We also began to build bigger buildings. And actually, this is a whole sidebar, that the history of human architecture is really a fascinating study of our consciousness. Because the first buildings, they weren't just for shelter, they were for connecting with the world. But then we kind of let that go. And as we started to control the world around us, and we covered the earth with stone plazas and things like that, we slipped down into the layer of human consciousness that is designed for a very particular reason to be either horizontal or vertical, but not both at once. It's either or, A to B. And so our whole societies became, we flattened the earth out, and then our societies became hierarchical. And we were thinking more than feeling. So if you're in your brain focused on thinking, you have no awareness left over for sensory data. And also thoughts are formed after sensory experience. So if we're only thinking, we're in serious lag time relative to our actual experience. And then you think about businesses have been working with lagging indicators for how many decades? So we don't really know what is currently occurring. We only know after the fact, and then we take that as reality. So yeah, it was a lovely thought, but I think it was Heraclitus who said, it's dangerous to think in sunlight. And if that isn't a statement of a culture being afraid of nature.
Yeah. So it sort of feels like, because as you're explaining that, I've been listening to a lot about ancient history. So I'm fascinated with it because I'm interested to see how this current empire that we live in, it will evolve, right? So I'm looking back at history and saying, well, what's going to happen? I'm way outside of my comfort zone in that space, which is why I'm trying to educate myself in that.
Yeah.
But So it's binary, right? It's good or it's bad, it's this or it's that, and so we need to run or fight. So we have that wired in. To be creative, we need to be in a different mindset, if I read that correctly. The current narrative is around emotional intelligence, right? So we need to be aware of our all of those awarenesses, vulnerability, all of those things, which is now becoming in in my world, which is the sort of the management consulting, emotional and coaches and all that sort of space. We're talking about being vulnerable, it's a strength, not a weakness, all the rest of it. So a business owner listening to this situation or this conversation, and I'm just conscious of time, how do they then, and this is a big question, I've asked this a couple of times, and so I'm just trying to tease out what the next step might be for someone who is wanting to move outside of that binary decision-making process. So what would other than walking out into the which I still love and do every day, it just helps, right?
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're not sure of what it is that I'm talking about, go back and listen to episode 2. We talk about that a lot. So Marti, what's the future for the businesses, the business owner who is now has that courage to step forward and go, okay, I don't want to be like this. I'm tired of being in this rat race, right? The hamster wheel. Where does emotional intelligence fit into all of this?
Well, the problem with AI and EI and all these little things that we have acronyms for is that we've been kind of living at the runway level of consciousness, and we're so close to the ground. We see this part, and then we move a little bit, and then we see that part, and we move a little bit, and then we see that part, and we don't see the totality. This is something that we lose when we lose full consciousness and our awareness is working in that thin, low layer where the limbic system is and so on. So short of dedicating yourself to serious training in consciousness, I would just try this. And it's a big metaphor. It's an original human metaphor. Imagine that you're sitting in your business and you just do some reflection, do a recapitulation. Okay, here's my business. This is what we do. These are the problems. These are the things I'm trying to decide. This is the money we make. These are who I think my clients are. This is what my product means. Just a little stuff you already know, but just get it clear in your mind, maybe mind map it on a big piece of paper. And then imagine that you are a raptor, big wings, and you lift up on a beautiful draft of wind and you hover over your business from about 40,000 feet up. And you see your business, right? And you can see the few clients that you could recognize from ground level, but then you let your radar screen, if you will, the context in which you see your business, you let it get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And beyond what you can know at runway level, what else do you see? Who else could you serve? If your business does exactly what it does, but you look at it in terms of, this is one example, in terms of maybe you serve 3 counties in your area, but what if you serve 3 countries? Just change the context. Don't change your business. Change the context. And then take a look at, does your business have bigger value that you didn't realize? Are there different ways to get the supplies that you need that you didn't see before? Is there something you could be doing because you know a whole bunch of stuff? Maybe you're only producing one product or one service, but you put yourself in a bigger context and suddenly, oh my God, I could be doing these other things and it would feed what I do on the runway level. and would make the business more fun for me, more meaningful. This is the biggest thing you can do. And imagining yourself as a raptor, that gives you that third dimension. So go from a flat map to at least 3 dimensions and make the context bigger and take a look at who you are relative to the bigger context. Look for new meaning, look for new value, and then you will have an idea of new actions to take. And they will be more beneficial.
Can I just share with you my emotions as you were talking?
Yeah.
Because it was a wave, right? So when you started talking, I went, yep, okay, I that analysis of the business. We all do that, right? I've just written about it. Having the helicopter view, right? So the raptor getting 40,000 feet up there and looking down, and then seeing the opportunities. And I got all of that, right? And then you started talking about, what is possible and all of it. And immediately I went into this, wow, that feels like a lot of hard work, right? So it was like, oh, that means I'm going to have to do something that is different. I'm now going to have to make decisions. And, the marketing people say, don't give people more than one choice or 2 choices, right? Because they'll get into analysis by paralysis, right? Or paralysis by analysis. And so, don't do that. That's a bad thing. But what you're encouraging is for that to actually happen. And then I went through that sort of, well, this is going to take a lot of energy, but then you brought in but this is so much fun. And that's why we are in business, is to enjoy ourselves. And we do the things that we love. We started the business because we had this ambition to be different, to, unemployable is probably why a lot of us are in business.
Exactly.
Yes. We wouldn't work for ourselves, right? So yet we do. So it was that bringing that back into it, which I then started to feel energetic about that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why it's fun. That's brilliant that you picked that up. The reason it's fun is that when you add the third dimension, the new ideas are given into your awareness. It is no work at all. But people who are afraid to soar, add that third dimension, they're stuck in their prefrontal cortex. And this takes a lot of work. If we're thinking, it takes a lot of energy. Yeah. Thought is formed way after we collect data from our world. So we're in lag time. By the time we're thinking, we've lost most of the data anyway. And we're mostly working from what we already knew, and very little new stuff is in our awareness. It's really effortful. Plus, the prefrontal cortex has a straight shot superhighway neural connection to the limbic fear circuit. It's a terrible place to live. Don't live up here. So in the experience of being that raptor and looking at yourself from 40,000 feet up, in order to fly, you have to have your awareness on the winds, right? And then when you look at that big landscape, your awareness is on the landscape. You don't have to think. You'll be given new ideas, and new perspectives. And, in the business, the consciousness business, we call them downloads. You'll get downloads from the world. You get new ideas, inspirations, and it's easy. It's easy. It's hard if you're glued to the runway and you have to get from here to there. On the runway, you can't see very far. I mean, seriously. And you want to get far, but you can't see. So you hope, oh God, I hope I can get there. It's too hard staying in 2 dimensions.
Marti, I've got an eye on the clock. We're trying to keep this to half an hour. We've probably got a lifetime ahead of us of half an hour to talk about this subject, I hope. I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation. So what would be, we don't have to come up with, but normally at the end of this, Evelyn asks us, what would be the next natural conversation to have of this? Do you have any thoughts on that? What would be the next conversation to have?
Well, I think what we're talking about needs to be expanded. And I also think if we could have an actual business example, one of our next sessions.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll work on that.
The more we can unfold it.
Yeah.
But I think this is really
a practical example of the application of this theory. Right, great. Okay. Now, we will be back in a fortnight's time for everybody, and if you're on our list, you'll get reminded of that. But Marti, just before we go, you've got a very exciting trip coming up to Peru. So just give us a little bit of a teaser. You'll be back in a fortnight before you go, but just what is that? What is that trip that you're on?
Well, it's a fascinating trip. We've been doing this trip every year for 24 years, I think, since the year 2000. And what's happening is that in the Andes, in the Peruvian Andes in particular, in the 90s, a colleague of mine was working with one of the great indigenous leaders in the Cusco region. And this leader, whose name was Don Manuel Quispe, said to my colleague, who's a Peruvian, he said, it's really clear that the time from my people is coming to an end, but the wisdom we have needs to stay alive. So he asked my colleague to bring him Westerners, and Don Manuel said that he would move out of the mountains and move into Cusco and start training us. And this is, I've worked on a lot of different continents, and I'm initiated in all kinds of places, but I have never seen an indigenous leader. And this guy was the president of the Quero Nation for many, many years, and he was a very important, they're called Alto Masayoks. His vision was that the lineage needed to be passed on to Northern people. And I have never heard of the elders agreeing to pass the lineage on to other people from other continents and other races and other lineages. And so we have continued with my colleague. There's a small group of us who go every year to work with the elders and to work with the powers that train them. And every year, year by year, we're initiated. The wisdom is passed on. Technologies are passed on. And this is not just how to shake a rattle and do a secret ceremony. What's encoded in indigenous wisdoms is the knowledge of human consciousness and how it works. Every continent, every culture, the elders are the keepers of human consciousness at the level of energy, at the level of physics. And they're the keepers of the knowledge of how humans are supposed to live on the planet with all the rest of nature. Yeah? And so this is an official transmission in South America to all of us. And everywhere else I've been initiated, I actually have been given the same instruction to actually pass the lineage on. So coming up in June is it's our 2024 research trip. And from time to time, I take my own students basically for the same kind of trip. But yeah, it's an extraordinary event on the planet. Cultures coming together, a transmission of the wisdom that we need. Yeah.
Well, we are very fortunate to have you here. Well, I'm very fortunate. I don't know. I can only speak for me. I am blessed every time we have these conversations, Marti. Really do appreciate it. I hope everybody that was listening to this live and on our recordings, I hope you get a lot of value from it, and we'll see you in a fortnight.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Steve.